Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks once again for joining us for another session of Aware Muslim Presents. We have an interesting episode for you today. We actually are going to start with a clip. I'm not going to say why. I think you're going to find it interesting. This is Wolf Blitzer and a Trump campaign manager, not campaign manager, but a campaign representative by the name of Sean Spicer. I think it'll be interesting.
Tell us a little bit more. Should he go out and deliver a speech specifically denouncing these neo-Nazis, these white supremacists, saying
Listen.
I'm just asking, should he go out there and deliver a specific speech and make that abundantly clear he doesn't want these people support and he condemns them?
When is it going to be enough? He has condemned everyone that's come out and supported him, every group that supported him. At some point, you've got to take, his position and go move on. But over and over again, somebody will come out and say, I support Donald Trump. He has to denounce them. Someone tweets. He has to refute the tweet. At what point is his position clear? He has said that he refutes that. That's not the kind of movement that he wants to support or be energized by him. That's not the kind of people that he wants to be associated with him. And so I don't know how many more times Donald Trump can make his position clear, but it has been crystal clear for a long time and over and over and over again with every tweet, utterance, you name it, Facebook post, he has to somehow respond to it. He has made his position clear. It's time that we accept that position and move on, because that's not his focus.
So why do you think, Sean, these neo-Nazi groups, these white supremacist groups, and we saw them here in Washington over the weekend, you saw the video, why do you think they still support him?
I don't know. That's really not my focus, figuring out why certain groups support him. He won the election with tens of millions of people. I haven't sat down and figured out why certain groups, supported him or didn't. He won the election. His focus is on making the country better. But at some point, take his word as what it is. But to continue to ask him over and over again to denounce the same people, the same words, the same groups over and over again is getting a bit preposterous.
So as you guys just saw, that was the Republican National Committee Communications Director, that's a mouthful, Sean Spicer, and he was being interviewed on CNN by Wolf Blitzer. And so it might be obvious to some of our viewers, but what about that was so interesting, Malik?
Yeah, and this is when we prepare for these shows, it's like we try to look at what's relevant to the Muslim community and the global ummah, and it was obvious that why we had to talk about it. It was just amazing to see how when Sean Spicer had to deal with being he had to deal with being almost like it was like to being Muslim, and I know that he'd be horrified at that thought probably, but maybe not. But
am I Muslim now? Is that how it works?
So I mean, what it is that what I wanted, I think what's important to share with the Muslim community is that we often get this kind of static, right? Like when when a Muslim does something bad, like we have to answer for it. And I think we should kind of first off, I think one as people who carry dawah, and we have responsibility. We can't ignore the fact of the media being a juggernaut, right? And we have to continually explain. What the Muslim position on this is, and that Muslims are against killing innocents and blah blah blah, right?
So just to be clear, let's back this up a little. So you're specifically talking about, just to make it clear for everyone, the idea that Sean was continuously asked again and again and again to apologize for something that Trump hadn't actually done, had already kind of condemned more than once, but he just keeps going and going. He says, but did he not do more? Could he not apologize further? Could he not have reached out to more people, done a teleconference on it or a press conference, until Spicer is forced to ask, when is it going to be enough? Which for Muslims is like, it's a relevant question. We ask that question every time something happens.
Yeah, and that's where kind of my my attitude is that for people to ask Muslims to condemn this, it's ridiculous, right? Like it's like how. When you look at this election, it's obvious that the Trump campaign was based on, at a minimum dog whistle politics and race, right? It was based on that, and so then all of a sudden for him to say, he doesn't know why these white supremacist groups were happy saying "Hail Trump," winning, right? Hail our people,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's to me it's a little bit. he's trying to kind of wash their hands.
Well, he did say he wants to look into it and find out why they were energized. So let's see where that investigation goes.
Yeah, calling Mexicans rapists, right, and for a complete shutdown of 1.6 billion 1.6 billion people in the world of Muslims, right? Closing the border to them, and I think that I think we should we should be aware that that white people being as terrorists within America has been a problem, right? Like the KKK in the Timothy McVeigh when that bomb blew up in
Oklahoma, right?
In Oklahoma, that these things do happen, and the famous incident when the KKK burned down a church, killing 4 innocent African American girls. Yeah. These are real casualties, and this is not something. And the Nazis, for him to say, with the people doing the Nazi salute in the thing. The Nazis, they butchered the Jews in Europe, and so it's not These are not light matters, and I don't want to make light of it, right? It's not. These are not things, and these are real issues. However, at the same time, as we know, a person's only responsible for their actions, and the idea that if someone like Trump, who's a billionaire, can't control people of his fellow ethnicity, and now he's the president-elect, can't control people of his fellow ethnicity, and people don't expect him to do that, then there's no way on earth you should expect Muslims to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that's where this becomes interesting, because for Muslims, every time something happens, there's this expectation that, it's not even an expectation that's just from the people or even the media, because the media does this with everybody. Wolf Blitzer, just to go on Wolf Blitzer for a bit. I remember when Freddie Gray had been executed, I should say, in Baltimore. There were protests there, obviously Black Lives Matter protests, and they brought a Black Lives Matter activist on Wolf Blitzer's show, who was going to talk about the violence that they were suffering at the hands of the police. And Wolf Blitzer didn't want to hear any of it. He didn't seem interested. He just kept saying, yeah, but you do condemn the riots, and you do condemn the Black Lives Matter protesters, breaking shops, and you agree with the President Obama, implying who's also black, condemning this. You condemn that too. You agree with the black president, don't you? And the activist was like, we are here to condemn violence. We're here to condemn the violence of the police against the black community. That's the violence we're here to condemn. Of course, no one supports, the breaking down of shops and this, but let's stick on issue. So, this is how the media plays it. But even Trump, forget his 1.5 billion Muslim ban, and forget what he says about Mexicans. More specifically to this point of condemnation, Mike Pompeo, who's one of his picks for cabinet, I think he's his intelligence chief, or he's picked him for some kind of high-ranking position. Mike Pompeo is known for saying that imams are not loud enough in their condemnation of terrorism, and because they're not loud enough in that condemnation, they're actually complicit not just in current acts of terrorism. He says any future acts of terrorism, they could be complicit in that as well, just by not speaking out against it enough, right? So this is something that his own cabinet pick is saying about Muslims, yet when people are asking Trump, when they're asking white people, hey, do you condemn this? White people are like, why should I feel the need to condemn this? Well, why should we as Muslims feel the need to condemn what happens, through someone else's actions as well? It's the same principle. If, Richard Spencer, who is, I guess, a white nationalist and, has good views about Hitler or whatever, or at least, plays to that crowd, if he is not someone you want to take responsibility for as a white person, then why should we take responsibility for, some random group that claims to have established the state in the middle of, Syria and Iraq? What relevance should we have to that?
Yeah, and I think the idea of condemnation, it's it's a very people should realize it's a very simplistic thing. If I condemn sugar, now is diabetes going to go down, right? It's not. People are not, just because I condemn sugar and eating sweet things, it's not going to reduce the level of diabetes at all,
Absolutely.
Right? And, me and my crazy diets, right? I'm not on, I've cut out all my sugar.
Just to be clear, Malik does not eat sugar, so his condemnation is practical, but clearly diabetes has gone nowhere, so
yeah.
You have failed, Malik.
Right? And that's the thing, is that what is when you look at these sort of things about, whether it's white nationalism or the problem of minority groups acting violently, it's not these simplistic things that are going to, by condemning or you condemning anything, is not going to change anything, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because and that's how dog whistle politics work. Even if Trump condemns it, it's not going to do anything, right? Because what the racist would see is that, which is dog whistle politics being the idea is that only the racist really understands the racially coded rhetoric.
Yeah.
If Trump were to condemn and even hold a press conference where he condemns this type of behavior, what the racists will say is that he just had to do that because of because of the establishment, because of the media and all that, and it won't affect them at all.
Of course.
And they'll just see his overtures in terms of the Muslim ban and the building the wall, etc., as his real, the real Trump, and that other stuff is just kind of play.
Exactly.
Right?
The damage he's done, he's already done, and so he can't really undo that, right? And that wasn't through not condemning. That was more through having policies that were specifically coded
Absolutely.
to energize white nationalist groups, which is a separate issue. But I guess.
What it's saying is that even if he condemns, it won't work.
It won't
right?
work at this
point.
point.
You have to do something more than that, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you have to do more. And then the example I always use when it comes to nationalism is that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he moved from Makkah to Medina, where the Muslims came, the Muhajirin were refugees in Medina.
Yeah.
What obviously through the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that he built brotherhood between the Muhajirin, the immigrants, and the locals, right?
Yeah.
So he broke down those bonds of tribalism, right?
Sure. He took federally mandated actions to create this kind of buddy system where he said, if you're a muhajir, if you're someone who's a refugee here, one of the resident families has to take you in, has to give you a few months where they're sharing their resources with you before you can set yourself up. And what that did is it forged those bonds of brotherhood.
Absolutely.
That would never be acceptable in a capitalist nation, because it would be seen as a violation of property rights and individualism and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. Right?
Absolutely. So, and the point is that that's what. However, that being said, that despite the capitalism inability to implement such a policy, that's what's necessary. If you want to break down, if Sean Spicer said got up there and obeyed Wolf Blitzer and said, I condemn blah blah blah. Yeah. Here's a signed statement. I'll do whatever you tell me. Yeah. It's not going to change the situation like this. Like the society must take radical steps to actually eliminate racism, right?
Yeah.
It's been almost it's been 50 years since the civil rights movements, and still it's a problem, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the point, is that even with the violence with that you see, that has to do with the colonialist policy towards the Muslim world, right? And this is coming from that Muslim lover Rumsfeld, right? Yeah. It's a report from his Pentagon that highlighted that's the problem, right? Yeah. So what I'm saying is these simplistic ideas of condemning have nothing to do with actually solving the problem, but rather it's just a way to belittle and to make the especially when it comes towards Muslims, to belittle them and to belittle us and to make us subservient to the state.
And I think that's what's interesting, right? Because I think with the pattern between both of those demands, to think that Trump condemning nationalism will make nationalism go away, or Muslims condemning violent extremism will make violent extremism go away, it's hiding the real solution, which is much more difficult and much more radical.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you want to address racial issues, you have to dismantle mass incarceration. You have to get rid of the prison state. You have to look at the way you fight the war on drugs and things like that, and not make those excuses to have racialized systems of control over black communities, which are being occupied by the police. Right. You really have to look into things like that. Similarly, if you're going to talk about the relationship between the West and Islam, condemnation doesn't even begin to do justice to what is a very fraught relationship. And it's fraught not because Muslims are xenophobic, because they don't like outsiders, because they are extremist and just unwilling to work with you. Like, Muslims are known for their hospitality. They're known for being people who bring other people in and who share their food with them and who share their ideas with them and who love to have a conversation about even the deepest issues. What what really angers Muslims is the brutality of the U.S. war machine. What really angers Muslims is a system of control in which, you know, the only way to work with the West is either to be totally subservient to it or to be destroyed by it. Those are the only two opportunities you get to exchange. Either the West imposes a brutal dictator on a Muslim nation that will do exactly what the West tells it to do, or they will go to war with that nation, destroy everything that's in there, start a sectarian war if they can. Like, this is what Muslims have experienced from the West. And then when a portion of the Muslims get upset and do something which even Muslims condemn, and even Muslims see as like, no, this is not the way to respond. It's haram. It's not mandated by our religion. The conversation becomes, maybe there's something about Islam that's making them so violent. No, maybe there's something about the way you've been treating them for the past few decades that's making them so violent. Maybe that's the real uncomfortable question that you're not asking yourself. And so both times, this respectability politics of, oh, if we just act nicely and condemn the right people. And I mean, just as a final point, I don't want to, maybe dwell on this, at least on my end, but which Muslim North American leader hasn't condemned terrorism? I can't even think of one that hasn't. Like, it's the only way we find imams operating. They're so concerned about public pressure and how the media is going to perceive them, and things like that. That they've all, in some way, said terrorism is bad, ISIS is bad, 9/11 was bad. Like, at what point, as Sean Spicer said, when is it going to be enough?
Right.
If the Fiqh Council of North America condemns it, if, hugely popular conservative, muftis from Pakistan, like Tahir al-Qadri or whatever, regardless, if he condemns it, if it's condemned by virtually every main Muslim public speaker you can think of, like, what else is supposed to be done?
Yeah, and I think that's a point that for the non-Muslim, our non-Muslim viewers out there, is to kind of, when you look at Sean Spicer, how he feels, so he reacts to that kind of humiliation being put on him. It's a human thing. It's not just Muslims in Arabic we call this word izza, which means dignity, right? And it's like, we as Muslims have that dignity as well, and we feel the same way, right? Yeah. It's just because we're a minority, because of the differences in our position between Sean Spicer and ourselves, we're not allowed to express it that way, right? Because there'll be different consequences, right? So, and I think that's an important point, that it is humiliating to be forced to do that, and that's what I found interesting when I saw Sean react to that the way that he was being treated by Wolf Blitzer.
That's actually fascinating. So I guess for Muslims, the takeaway is don't be apologetic, right? Don't just accept the narrative. Don't condemn when you're asked to condemn something. Don't immediately see an action and be like, oh, okay, now I must go condemn it and talk. Yeah, clarify the Islamic position on violence or anything else, but really stick to the idea of, if we want to worry about violence, if we want to worry about race, if we want to worry about anything, let's address root causes here. Let's talk about difficult solutions and not stick to band-aid posturing of just, oh, I'm against this or I'm for this, or things that won't fundamentally help. But Jazakallah khair for watching, and please do like, subscribe, and whatever else YouTube people do.